Yo, how's it going, everyone? It's good to come at you live from Tel Aviv today. I'm out on the balcony at my Airbnb here. I do want to say, first off, forgive me if there are these giant bees in Tel Aviv, and there's a beautiful view on this balcony, but if a giant, like 10 minutes, that's why, because I do not want to get stung by these things. They're like half the size of a golf ball, and one of them almost flew right into my face the other day. So don't expect it to happen. Haven't seen any today so far. It's 7 a.m. here, by the way, so if I'm a tad bit groggy, forgive me, but had my morning coffee. We should be set to go. But yeah, worst case, we'll have to move inside. Don't think that's going to happen, but throw that out there. Welcome. Glad you guys can make it. It's going to be a fun one today. And yeah, so without further ado, jump into it. I got another value-packed for you guys today, and I think you guys are really going to like what we have in store. I want to give all the new guys tuning in a big welcome from everyone here at the Social Man. We're really pumped to have you guys here, and I think you're going to feel right at home in our community. Just the fact that you're here, took responsibility for getting the results that you know you're capable of. It's a major win. So congratulate yourself for being one of the rare men who's really willing to be honest with himself about, the areas where you can improve. And, that says enough. And to finally attack the problems you have head on. I mean, a lot of people aren't even themselves about the problems that they do have, or it's just not necessarily problems, but just areas where they could use a tip or two. So that you are able to do that says a lot about you. And I'm 100% confident that you're going to see noticeable improvements in a very short time. Most of you probably found the Social Man because you're looking to improve your social skills or get better results in your dating life and sex life or whatever it may be. And, you're just tired of settling for less than a satisfying dating and sex life. That's how most of our members find this community. But as you'll quickly discover, TSM society is much more than that. And, it's about building and achieving your ideal lifestyle and creating a well-balanced that makes you happy and fulfilled on a regular basis. We're here to help you live the good life, whatever that might mean to you. Yeah, I just want to give that prelim here. And for anyone that is listening, some of you may know every month we focus on installing a particular character trait that's fundamental to the success of all the world's most attractive and charismatic and charming, persuasive men. And the reason for this is, your character is your core, and the trait focusing on this month is being challenging. And in today's webinar, you're gonna see how to be challenged when escalating towards sex in a way that's incredibly arousing. As with all the techniques that I'm going to give you, make sure you're discerning about how, make sure to choose the ones you are, and as is adapting them to fit your natural personality. So without further ado, let's get into the featured presentation that you guys have all been waiting for. I want to start out by giving you guys an analogy that I think will help you approach sexual escalation and creating sexual tension with the right mind. Analogy in the back of your mind would be really helpful in when to move forward and when to take a step back. Just to be completely honest with you guys, I did not come up with this analogy myself. I actually heard it a while back from another dating coach that I really respect, and I just think it's the best way that I've heard to look at sexual escalation and have the right mindset. So I just felt compelled to. So she is think of the process of sex kind of like a temperature dial, like the knob on a stovetop. Imagine the dial is numbered from 0 to 100, and just stay with me. Live frogs, and I'm curious how you know about that. But if you put a live boiling pot of water, it'll jump right out. The drastic change in temperature will cause it to immediately hop away just out of pure instinct. But if you put a frog in a pot of lukewarm water and then ever so slightly turn up the heat, the gradual increase makes it so the frog never actually recognizes the danger that it's in, and it'll just continue to swim around in the water until it's boiled to death. And I know that that's a morbid analogy, and obviously we're not putting women in any danger here or looking to harm them in any way. That goes without saying. But the same concept apply when you're turning up the heat, even if you're in a relationship and trying to just get your girl in the mood, and so be it. If you're too abrupt, trying to physically express too much desire too quickly, it'll cause her to have like an almost visceral reaction of resistance to the advances, because even if she's attracted to you and enjoying your company, that drastic change will be off-putting to her. And for us men, for guys, a lot of times it doesn't really make sense. For guys, sexual or physical and then mental. It starts in the body and then moves to the mind. But for women, it's actually the exact opposite. Sexual attraction and arousal starts in the mind, and then the body becomes physically aroused. And to help you understand this distinction, I'm going to give you guys just a really quick lesson on the psychology of sexual desire and how it arises. And I'm not sure how many of you guys know about my background or how I discovered the whole world of dating and seduction advice my freshman year of college. And I became so fascinated that at the end of my freshman year, communication studies with knew those things were very related, improving your dating and relationships life. And I kind of wanted to look at that whole realm from an academic and scientific perspective. And the reason I tell you this is for my senior thesis, I had to do a research paper on any topic of my choice within the field of communication studies. So I ended up writing a 50-page paper, which is about 15 pages over the suggested page limit, and it was titled The Science of Seduction. And in it, I dissect all the research and scientific studies that exist on romantic and sexual attraction. And one of the really, really interesting things I wrote about in that theory, advanced by a guy named back in the late 80s, and escapes why we are who we are. And in it, he puts forth this idea kinds of sex. The first is what he calls limerent sexual attraction, and the second is lusty sexual attraction. And I'll read just a really quick blurb from that paper explaining the difference between the two and why they're important for our discussion here today. I'm going to take a quick sip of coffee here. My mouth's a little dry. All right. So here's the quote. Quote, limerent sexual attraction is experienced when an individual becomes aroused by the potential to develop a strong and lasting bond with another person. The potential of falling in love with precisely because that they are associated with that potential. Essentially, limerent sexual attraction is an attraction to romance, an urge to be swept up in the romantic process. And an example would be a woman who is attracted to a musician because her ideal type of where the man can sing to her. Now, lusty sexual attractions, on the other hand, are attractions to a particular type of person who embodies specific physical or non-physical traits, usually physical, but they can be non-physical too. Lusty sexual attraction is experienced when an individual becomes aroused by a certain trait that he or she has come to associate, consciously or not, with sexual desire. And therefore, the trait has become imprinted in one's mind as a source of sexual arousal. For lusty attractions, the trait alone is objectively arousing, regardless of what we may think about the individual who possesses it. An example would be who's turned a woman with long, slender legs. It matters the woman is the meanest, nastiest, will be aroused by the long, slender. Importantly, because limerent attraction is associated with an individual's persona or energy, rather than objectively arousing characteristics, it can emerge only once two people have become acquainted. Whereas lusty sexual attraction can emerge within moments of glimpsing whatever characteristic has been imprinted as the object of sexual desire. End quote. So both men and women can experience limerent and lusty sexual attraction, but in general, women's limerent sexual attraction, the attraction to the romantic process, and then lusty sexual attraction becomes evoked afterwards. And once a man has shown that his character matches the type of man that can provide the type of romance that she's looking for. So hopefully this distinction provides insight into what it is that for women, sexual arousal starts in the mind. It starts with a projection into the future of what that romantic process might look like between her and the guy that she's involved with. Before any sort of physical arousal can occur, you have to create and you have to arouse a desire for romance, and planting these seeds sexually later sprout into lust. And this usually has to be a gradual process. The seeds kind of need time to grow and evolve. And the goal is to slowly but surely adjust your communication and behavior from friendly and engaging to more flirtatious and arousing and sexual, and turning up the heat little by little as the interaction progresses, and being sure of her comfort every step of the way. So that goes back to the analogy that we talked about a few minutes ago earlier in the webinar. So hopefully that provides a useful kind of high-level overview of how female sexual arousal works. And for the rest of the webinar, we'll be going over some practical methods and techniques to do that, to turn up that heat and plant those seeds in the most possible. That I'm going to share with you guys is actually the simplest, but probably one of the most difficult to put into practice. And that is slowly changing every aspect of your communication behavior as the interaction progresses. So slowly, you want to lay down every single aspect of your communication, your body language, as well as your voice and the words that you're saying. So this falls right in line with the analogy that I brought up at the beginning, where your goal is to gradually turn up the heat. And when you're slowing down the way that you're communicating, it's going to really, really gradually turn that dial from 0 to 3. And with this one, verbals are really key. And I'm just gonna go through a few specific elements of nonverbal communication to pay attention to. And when I say nonverbal, that includes things like vocal tonality and the pace of your voice. It's everything except for the actual words that you're saying. So the first element of your nonverbal communication that you want to be really aware of and start to comfort and trust, and you've got to the point where the conversation is flowing smoothly, you want to start slowing down your gestures, any physical gestures that you make, and also start closing down the physical distance between you guys. And again, very, very gradually, nothing sudden here. And another aspect of nonverbal communication that's really important here is eye contact. As language, you want to also start to ramp up the amount of eye contact that you're making a little bit as well. Trying not to make any or with your head or jerky movements, and making sure that your eyes aren't darting back and forth like you're looking around the room really quickly. Again, the goal is to slow everything down, which will create that tension and that seductive effect. And when you combine these elements, you'll actually feel, if you're doing it right, you'll actually feel inside of you the start. It might be uncomfortable if you're not used to doing this, but that's something that you'll get used to the more and more as you start to practice and start to gain a little more experience. So don't let that uncomfortability deter you from continuing. That just means you're on the right path. And you also really want to pay attention to the tone and the pace of your voice. Speaking in a slightly lower voice, if you can, lowering your voice just a little bit, and introducing more pauses between your words, and slowing down the speed at which you're talking are all ways to build sexual tension and evoke really, really strong emotions. So I just did. I hope that was instructive in kind of the effect that you're looking for. So with this, the cool part about using your nonverbals, your body language, your eye contact, your vocal tonality, the pace at which you're speaking, the cool thing about doing all this is the words that you're saying really don't matter all that much. You could be talking about something very normal and very platonic. And if you're implementing these elements of nonverbal sexual escalation, the fact that you're talking about something that's not overtly flirtatious or sexual won't matter. It will still create really high levels of sexual tension as you start to do it. And these are some of the practical elements it means to turn up the dial. Like go from with your communication, like loud and friendly, immediately straight to very seductive and super strong eye contact and closing that distance really quickly. You don't want to go from one extreme to the other in a quick way. You want to gradually do it so that you can kind of monitor her comfort level the whole way. And so that there's no abrupt change that kind of triggers any sort of resistance in her. Because the tension created when you start to slow everything down is what actually creates the impulse for action. I'll say that again because it's a really important point. Tension creates the impulse for action. And when the tension is, the action it provokes will be kissing and physical touching and getting intimate. So this is really, really subtle stuff. And sometimes it's hard to be aware of it consciously in the moment, but it probably accounts for about 80% of effective sexual escalation. The nonverbal side of things probably accounts for about 8% of it. And I start out by focusing on just one or two things that I just mentioned, one or two aspects. Really, really good at creating sexual tension with your nonverbals, with your voice, with your eyes, with your body language, and with the manipulation of physical space. A lot of times that's all you need to start to. Talking about today is just as spices that you sprinkle into the interaction here and there to spike her arousal if it starts to die out or the interaction starts to get a little stale, excuse me. But the main dish that we're talking about here is really your body language and your nonverbals. So that's the piece in terms of practical techniques. But another technique that I found to be really, really effective is using stories to introduce or transition to the topic of sex. This is something that a lot of guys struggle with. It's something that I definitely struggled with a lot in the past, is, going from just holding a normal conversation, getting to know each other, and, just being friendly, to starting to be more flirtatious. Transition in so stories are a really great way to do it, and they don't have to be true, but ideally you would want them to be true, because you'll just naturally tell the story in a more engaging and compelling way if it's not made up. And it's best also if the stories are about someone else rather than about yourself, like a friend or a relative who had like a sexual experience that they told you about. And the cool thing about using stories is, number one, you're not directly asking her about sex or telling her about your own sexual experiences. So it's less obvious and abrupt, and therefore it won't create that kind of visceral reaction we talked about earlier that will cause resistance or that cause to kind of be alarmed. This is like turning up the dial from using stories is, whereas directly asking her about sex would be like turning it from 0 to 25, which is a lot of times too much of a jump for a lot of women, and again will create a little bit of resistance. And number two, the second cool aspect is that by using stories, you can use them as a way to screen her for sexuality and start to understand if she has the kind of sexual personality that you're looking for or that you appreciate. And the way you do this is by using a story, telling a story about some aspect of sex that you find joy or that you're involved with, to be able to embody. You want that to be part of her sexual personality. So, for example, the story I'll use a lot of this time is a true story about two of my friends who had sex in an amusement park. And I'll bring it up by, very simply just by asking her if she likes roller coasters. So when you do this, when you're thinking of stories that you want to use, also think of ways that you can see that story into conversation. So, that was about sex in an amusement park, and I bring it up by asking her if she likes roller coasters, and then that's a perfect transition into that topic. So you might want to think about how you can do that as well with the specific story that you're going to use. So then afterwards, after I ask her, if she likes roller coasters, we'll talk about that for a sec. Then I'll be like, it's funny that actually reminds me of the story my friend was telling me the other day, and I'll go into the story. And then after that, if she doesn't tell you I'll ask her what she thinks about the story or what her reaction to it is. And I'll ask her, if she's ever had sex in public. And then it's a way for me, and if not, if she ever would, if that's something that's appealing to her. And then that's a way for me to screen her for sexuality, because that's something that I find kind of cool and I think is a lot of fun. The last point on number one, come up with a story that's true. If it's not true, at least something that could be true. Try to include in the story some aspect of sex that you want, or some aspect of a woman's sexual personality that you appreciate, and that will allow you to kind of challenge her. This goes back to the idea of being challenging and implementing a little bit of a challenging vibe into your conversations. This by screening her in this way, you're screening and qualifying and kind of making her try to work for your approval in a very, very subtle way. So that's a great one, and I really encourage you guys to try that out, because it's effective, and I haven't had anyone tell me that they used it and it created this blow transition to the topic of sex and start that process of sexual escalation. And the last technique that I'm going to share with you guys today is what I call incongruent communication. And this is when your verbal and nonverbal communication are opposite in their level of sexuality or flirtatiousness. So what it looks like it's easier to demonstrate in person, but essentially what it looks like is you're talking about something that's very platonic, almost boring or mundane in a way. But meanwhile, you're using physical touch to turn her on. So I'd be talking about like what you had for like that, but meanwhile you're running your hand along her back or something like, or meanwhile on the arm, and not the entire time. You want to be on and off with this stuff, but what this does is it again slowly turns up that dial. And also just to give you guys an idea of when to use this technique to implement it, is you want to use incongruent communication once the dial is about 40 or 50, I would say, out of 100. So obviously you want to do this once the physical space is closed a little bit between you guys, close enough that you can touch her, and things are starting to get a little more flirtatious, a little more sexual. And then this will turn up the dial from like 40 or 50 to 55. And then, the second time you do it, it might be like 55 to 60. And as you continue to do this, that dial will go up pretty high, actually. You can really, really turn a woman on a lot when you do this. Because essentially what you're doing is you're kind of distracting her conscious mind with normal, friendly conversation, sexual, not at all dirty. But meanwhile, the physical touch is starting to evoke that arousal. In the beginning, it creates the lusty kind of sexual attraction that I mentioned in the quote I read you guys. Really, really effective, and something that I use a lot in my own interactions. And another point that I want to make here, just before we get into the Q&A section, is in any form of sexual escalation, you want to be really, really careful, and you want to be cautious as you proceed and as you start to use the techniques to turn up the heat, because every woman has different levels of comfort when it comes to how quickly they're willing to escalate. And you have to really be paying attention and observant of her reactions and every step of the way. As you turn up that dial every 2 degrees, you want to be kind of monitoring her reaction. If she recoils in any way with her body language, or if she's trying to make the tension that you're creating, and that maybe you turned it up 2 or 3 degrees too much. So if that does happen, for example, like if you go to close the physical space between you, if you take a step closer to her and you notice her body kind of moves back a little bit, probably unconsciously, that's a sign that maybe you should take a step back, like literally physically take a step back, because when you got closer to her, that made her slightly uncomfortable. So take a step back and then go back to the previous step that you were at before. And each step of the way, if you go to use incongruent communication, and you're starting to use physical touch, and you kind of you notice that she starts to get uncomfortable. If she's like looking away a lot, that's kind of a sign that, okay, maybe she's not quite ready to be touched. Because some women, they're fine with kissing 10, 15 minutes into an interaction, and some women, they're not ready until an hour or whatever it is. So you really have to kind of gauge and adjust and calibrate these techniques based on her comfort level, because you don't want to do anything that's going to make her uncomfortable or that's going to create any sort of resistance on her part. So that's pretty much it in terms of the techniques that I have today. And now, before we get into the Q, I want to give out a free course, because we do this in all of our webinars, and it's kind of our reward to you guys for attending and for just taking action and being here. If you guys have not won, I'm going to look at the attendee list, and the way this kind of works, I'll pick one of you guys to be the winner. Afterwards, Julian will follow up with you guys, and you get a free course of your choice, one of the entry-level courses. There's about 6 of them to choose from. And if you want more information about what's inside each of them, or what you'll learn, or what the course is designed for, then Julian can give you that information. So the winner of today's free course is Jerry. Congratulations, man. I hope you enjoy the information that you're going to learn in whatever course. How to text her, could be desire, could be girlfriend activation system, whatever it may be. Again, if you want more information about what your choices are, Julian will give you all that. So congrats, dude. I know this one's going to be our courses have really, really just interesting concepts in them that will kind of allow you to, as with this, approach whatever the topic is with the right mindset, and give you lots of practical stuff that you can implement to improve your dating and sex life. So congrats, man. And now we have reached the final portion of today's webinar, where we do the live Q&A. So I'm going to scroll over to the chat here real quick. And if you guys do have a question for me, if I didn't explain something as well as I could have, or you want more information on one of the techniques that I went into, or you have any question about the information, the topics that we went over today, feel free to ask about that. Or if you're facing some sort of personal situation that you want some tips or advice on, feel free to ask about. I'm here for you guys. Whatever you want to ask me, let me know. So I'll just back here, and as always, it's going to go on a first come, first served basis. So I'll answer the questions as they come in, little by little. All right. What do you guys think of this tapestry behind me, by the way? I think it's super cool. This balcony is pretty sweet. I wish you guys could see the view of the sunset here, or sunrise, sorry. Again, it's just coming up. It's beautiful. Tel Aviv is an awesome city, by the way, for anyone that's looking to visit or is wondering about it. It's like this really cool mix between a Mediterranean city and kind of like a more, Mediterranean, like a Greek or Italian city, and kind of like a more westernized, like American city. So it has like the look of a Mediterranean city in terms of the aesthetics of it, but it kind of has the feel of, like a big city like New York or Los Angeles. Here, so many. Yeah, so highly recommend a visit for anyone that's considering it. We did have one or two guys that told us. David said he was having trouble downloading July's monthly adventure guide. We did have one or two guys that had an issue with that. It could be a browser thing. Some browsers aren't compatible with the PDF for whatever reason. If you switch browsers, it shouldn't be an issue, and we tried to fix it so that it works on every browser. I think our tech guys got that fixed on a day or two ago. So try again, David, and if you're still having an issue with downloading it, Julian can help you out with that, but it should be all good to go. Our tech guys are pretty on top of it. Well, I don't see any questions. I see a few. Your question, sexual attraction I talked about was limerence, which is Limerence. Limerent or limerent sexual attraction. You can look it up. It's kind of an out there word. When I remember when I was writing my paper, what's it called? Microsoft Word. Sorry. Microsoft Word didn't recognize it. It was telling me that it wasn't a word, and it was trying to autocorrect it. And I was like, huh, that's interesting. It's definitely a word. But yeah, good to see you, Dale. Good to see you here. Got a few familiar faces. Adrian, what's going on, my man? How you doing? Yeah. So, well, if there's no other questions, I'll give you guys another, 20 or 30 seconds or so. If you have something you want to ask me, be sure to throw that one in the chat. But other than that, I hope you guys are really enjoying the members content for this month. The first webinar that Christian Hudson and I did. I know you guys know him as Christian Hudson. Christian is his middle name and Hudson is his last name. And at the Social Man, we kind of refer to him as Jonathan Christian Hudson, JCH, just to avoid any confusion. So yeah, that's why I always say that. But yeah, we did an interview in the beginning of the month that is up in the member site. I enjoyed that one a lot. That one out. Highly encourage you to. As David mentioned, we have a brand new adventure guide in the members area. Lots of great exercises in there for you. New challenge of the month. So definitely explore that. See what resonates with you, and take action on the different adventure items that are in there. And if you want to go above and beyond and really prove yourself as a top guy in TSM Society, post your stories in the Adventure Chronicle section of the forums website. I'd love to see how you guys take that information and apply it, and see what kind of action you guys are taking. But beyond that, I'm going to enjoy the rest of my day. I don't see any other questions here. I hope you guys have a fantastic week. If you do think of a question that, after the webinar ends and you want to leave it in the comments section, or you can ask it in the forums on the thread. Julian will post a replay of the webinar in the forum. So if you have a question that comes to you after it ends, you can post it as a comment in that thread, and I'll get to it and respond to whatever the question. I'll continue to take action. Thanks for being here, and have a fantastic week. Later, guys.